raise your hand if you're new to the IPA here. Okay. So just for introduction purposes, we hold an IPA meeting where we review the Ideal Property Analyzer in depth every other week. We usually do it every other Monday at 6, but we're in discussions right now about when we might change that time so that more people can be involved, because we do have people on the East Coast. Right now on the East Coast, I believe it's almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah, 9, yeah.
9 o'clock, yeah. So it gets pretty late. So we might be changing the time on this just a little bit. But real quick, IPA is an analyzer that we developed for investors, real estate investors, where you can analyze everything from a note, performing, non-performing, a first or a second, to an REO. And take it even further and look at it from the standpoint of a rental or a fix and flip. The idea behind it was we wanted everything on one screen at our fingertips, where we would be able to look at about 6 or 7 different exit strategies all at once. And we would be able to tweak all the numbers to understand what our position was from the standpoint of our purchase price. So the whole system basically tells you whether or not you're actually making money, if there's a return on a specific exit strategy, or how much capital you're spending to that point. It also tells you how much time that you have involved. And so it looks at yearly yields. It looks at your money out against time. It looks at your capital expenditures, and it looks at your return on investments. So it does a lot. And it's almost impossible for us to explain everything that it does in one session. So that's why we have these every week, because we go over something a little bit different every week. We bring up different scenarios, and we also try to tell a little story about what's going on with the asset based on the numbers that we're looking at. So today I wanted to take one of our tapes. This was the last tape. I believe we reviewed this tape in our trade desk meeting on, what was it, last Tuesday at noon. And the reason why I brought this up was because there was an upside down asset in here, and I wanted to bring up that upside down asset in IPA and discuss it a little bit. I also wanted to bring it up because when I looked at it, it looked like there might be something wrong with the value, because I saw a value of $100,000, which I questioned. I didn't really understand that. I don't know if that's a typo on the seller's side, or if maybe they believe that it's worth $100,000. This might be one of those that slipped through the cracks on the seller's side. I don't know, but I'm gonna take you through this asset, and we're gonna take a look at that value, and we're gonna start assessing it. So that said, again, I just brought this up for illustrative purposes to let you guys know that we took it straight from the tape. And the asset that we're going to be looking at is this Florida asset in Fort Lauderdale. Okay. And before we begin, Rick, do you have any information on this particular asset?
No, other than what we went through. I mean, I know both of them sold for a higher amount because of the fact that these two were performing, correct?
I don't know if this was one of those ones that sold for a higher amount. I don't know if it was it 2 Floridas, or do you remember?
Yeah, the 2 Florida ones.
Okay. So anyway, let's take a look at this in IPA. So what I did, especially for those that are new, I'm just going to kind of walk through the process, and a lot of you already know this, so please bear with us as we go through it. But when you open up IPA, you're going to see this input sheet. This input sheet is going to ask you for an address, and you're going to enter the address. And so IPA is pretty much focused on residential assets across the United States. So whatever residential asset up to, I think, about 4 units, you can put in here, and it should find that asset if it's available online. So in this case, we put the address in, we said it was a note, we said it was occupied because we don't really know at this point, and we want to err on the side of conservatism. And so we're going to be conservative with this approach. So we're going to say occupied. It is a non-performing note. It is a first position. And this is the information related to the note that the seller has sent us: the unpaid principal balance, the P&I, the principal and interest, the interest rate, the term, the original loan balance, and the original loan date, the first paid date, and the next due date, which is basically tells us, the last time they paid. Now, in this case, we're looking at 11/1/20, which tells us that, they're over a year out, right? Just a little bit over a year. With that, what we do is we click on this analyze button, and it takes us to a sheet where all the information is at our fingertips. Now, I went ahead and I already fetched all the information, but typically this is going to be blank when you get to this point. You're going to hit one button right here, fetch all. That's going to go out to the internet. It's going to pull in all this information that you see in the middle column. We call it due diligence, but it's basically surface level due diligence, where it pulls in a picture. It'll tell you your type of asset. Is it single family residence, multifamily? What is it? The bed count, the bed bath count, the square footage, the lot size. It'll bring in the parcel number. It'll tell you what county it's from, what year it was built, when it was last sold even. It'll also bring in market rents if they're available. And then it'll take a look at some of the bigger sites out there like Zillow and iComps, and it'll pull in those digital values that are being presented out there based on this subject asset. We also wrote an algorithm where it goes out and pulls comps. So we're looking at comps that have been sold within the last 6 months within a specific vicinity of the subject property, and they have to have a certain bed bath count and square footage that's near the subject property. So what we're looking at here is taking an average price per square foot and applying it to our square footage in this case here. So we have a 2,189 square foot home. If we come down here, our average price per square foot is 374. So we're multiplying 374 by this square footage to arrive at our average price. What we do from here is we take an average of what Zillow's given us and what the comps are giving us, and we arrive at an ARV, or an after repair value. Now, this doesn't mean that this is an as-is value or anything like that. It means that this is the average after repair value of this asset based on the comps in the area. We also have a section here for as-is value. Now, this section is kind of loose. We put a number in here simply by backing out certain things like renovation costs and so forth. But we don't really know the status of this asset because we haven't visited it. We haven't talked to any realtors. We don't know what's going on with it. So the next step, if we were interested in this, would be to dial in that as-is value to understand its true value today. So that would require you getting on the phone, talking to a realtor, or maybe if you had MLS, getting on that and checking it out yourself if you had access. The other thing that, and this is just the surface level. We haven't done anything. We ran it. We haven't tweaked any numbers. This is as is after running it. Everything in this system is based on a set of assumptions, and your assumptions are completely tweakable. I mean, you can actually create templates with these assumptions. So these are your assumptions. Again, they're on the same page. You just scroll down to them. And you'll see here our offer price is set at 70% right now of the UPB. We could set at that or whatever we want. I can put that at 55%. Whatever I feel that this asset is worth given the status of the asset, whether or not it looks like it's a dump, it needs a lot of work, or it's only 1 year out. The borrower looks like they can potentially reinstate and so forth. So there's a lot of questions to be answered as you sort of get into the investment itself, but what this will do is it will allow you to dial in that number. We also have direct costs, which include a lot of ancillaries like winterization, cash for keys, foreclosures, attorney evictions, and even preservation for the preservation of the asset. We have a mini kind of rehab budget calculator in here as well, and it's all based on price per square foot. We have a low, medium, and high budget estimator. On the low, we're looking at $17 a square foot. On the medium, it's 26, and on the high, it's 36. So if we felt that this really needed a lot of work, we would keep it on the high. But right now, I'm going to put it on medium and leave it there. And then if we need to tweak it, we'll tweak it in a little bit. Now, I'm going to keep the offer price set at 55% of UPB. And over here, we have our insurance rate. So you might already have insurance, forced place insurance or whatever, and you might already have a specific interest rate that you're tied into. And you can change those interest rates here, and you can save that template. So every time you come in, it's going to calculate the same every single time. Now, if I come back to the top here, and I'm looking at the overall sheet, a couple of things I want to take a look at first before I do anything. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to see that this is a foreclosure, a judicial foreclosure procedure in the state of Florida. So because it's judicial, it's going to take a little bit more time to get through the foreclosure process. Also, I'm looking at the redemption period. A lot of states have redemption periods where, you know, they'll give the borrower a specific set of time after foreclosure to pay it off. If they can't, then the property goes to the lien holder. Now, because we're in COVID, that kind of messes everything up where timelines are extended, and you have forbearances on mortgages. You got all kinds of stuff going on. So what we typically do is we'll come down here to the time estimated for foreclosure. In this case, we have 5 months estimated. We'll boost this up to about a year. And in some cases, you might want to add even a year and a half, just because, you know, it's unknown. But yeah, let's go ahead and put a year and a half. Now, you'll also see that on this estimated time frame, we have collateral files. How long is it going to take us to receive the collateral files from the seller based on what's going on with this property? Sometimes it takes a week, 2 weeks. Sometimes it can take a month. I always like to be conservative, so I'm going to go ahead and put four weeks. I'm going to give myself a month on that. The eviction process. If somebody's actually living in there, they're going to have to be evicted, especially if it's a borrower. Some cases we'll see the owner or the borrower not living in there, but renting it out and collecting rent, which puts us in a really weird position or a difficult position in that, you know, we're now faced with evicting a tenant versus the owner. And that makes things just a little bit more sticky, but we allocate legal fees for all this stuff to handle it. And that's one of the things we'll see here under attorney eviction right here. So we also have a full renovation in here. How long is it going to take us to do a full renovation? Right now we have 7 weeks. I like to put maybe 8 weeks, give it a couple months on that full renovation. That does not include selling the property. That's just the construction of it to get it to the point where you can sell it. Okay. Now, selling the property, we have an estimator built into this, and we're not seeing it right now because we're in the process of updating it, but we have days on market where the IPA will tell us how many days on market this asset is in the general area, or an asset similar to this would go for in the general area. If it's 90 days, then it will automatically get added into the overall time frame. Also, we have a market temp area, which again, we're in the process of updating this, but this will tell us if this is a cool market or a hot market or a medium market, and will give us an indication if we take this property back, how difficult is it going to be to sell it? You know, that alongside the days on market will give us a pretty good idea. So coming back to the top here, we're looking at our, the other thing that we look at in the upper left-hand quadrant is the equity. You know, if it has equity, then the second thing that we look at is the fully reinstated amount, which basically this over here tells us how much the borrower has to pay the lien holder back in order to fully reinstate the loan. Okay. So if there's $294,000 of equity in this property, and to fully reinstate it is $12,530, do you think that the borrower is going to reinstate that loan? I think, you know, it's a pretty good chance that they're going to reinstate. And if they reinstate, then they fall right back into the terms of the loan, which basically say that which the terms of the loan is at 7.5% if we look at the rate. But if we were to purchase this loan at a discount, right, which was what we're doing, and they were to fully reinstate, and we were to get the borrower to fully reinstate, it would put us at an internal rate of return of 11.8%, which is far greater than the 7.5% if we were to buy it at par, right? It puts us at a cash on cash of about 11.7%. And our overall net profit, if we were to take it to term, would be $786,000. Now, most loans don't go 100% all the way to term. They don't go 360 months. They'll maybe go 7 to 10 years, and then they'll turn. So one of the things that we've done in this analyzer is we've added the ability to create, to actually specify a time frame to how long you hold it. So if we come down to our assumptions again, and we look at reperforming this note, and we say that, you know what, we're going to reperform it, and then we're going to sell it after a specific time frame. Let's just say 6 years, okay, which is about 72 months. And when we sell this note, we're going to have it seasoned, and because it's seasoned, we're going to sell this note performing at 90% of UPV, because that's pretty much the going rate right now. Now, if there were any deposits or past due amounts collected, or lender advances or anything like that, we can put that information here, which would also add to how much we sell it for and what our specific return would be. Now, this stuff could be things like we did a loan modification and we put some stuff on the back end of that loan, and that is all due, you know, when it's refinanced or when it sells or whatever. And that's what would go into these areas here. Coming back up to the top, if we look at the reperforming section, now that we've changed what we did down there, it's telling us that our hold time is 72 months. And at the end of that 72 months, if we were to sell that and capture 90% of the unpaid principal balance, it would put the buyer of that note at that time at an 8.7% internal rate of return. Why is that important? That's important because you want to be able to sell that note at a decent rate when you're ready to sell it. So if you're not at 8% or above, it's going to be very difficult to unload that note, because you need to have that yield at a certain rate to sell it quickly. Otherwise, it'll sit there. So that's pretty important to understand. And I think that's a very forward-looking analytic that a lot of people overlook or don't even think about. Now, this also tells us that the rest of the unpaid principal balance at this time is going to be $370,000. So right now the current is 445. 6 years down the road, when we go to sell it, the unpaid principal is going to be 370,000. And that's really what we're doing here, is we're selling a payment stream. That's what these mortgages are. They're payment streams. So at the end of the day, we're going to sell a payment stream that equals $1,306 at a yield of 8.7%. Internal rate of return and yield in this case are the same thing. So that's kind of how we look at about them, but we do know there's a lot of equity in it, and they're only a year out or a little over a year out, and they owe $12,500 on to fully reinstate. So that puts them in a good position to fully reinstate that loan and get it working, maybe even without a loan modification. Now, the second thing we'll look at is our offer price. Now, our offer price right now is set at 70%. And down here, you remember we set this offer price at 55. Well, in order for us to realize that 55, we have to recalculate this offer. So up here, we've added some buttons to recalculate the offer. If we click on this, it'll calculate that offer at 55% now. At 55%, if we were to purchase this asset, we're looking at a 15.6% yield, which is actually pretty good. It's really good, actually, because I am pretty confident that in this situation, you're going to be able to reinstate that loan, right? Now, the reason I brought this particular asset up is because when I looked at this loan from the seller, they were saying that this loan was only worth $100,000. Now, I'm pretty sure that's a typo. I'm not 100%, but I don't think that is the true value there. And if it was, it would put them in an upside down position where, they would be $384,000 upside down, which just doesn't make any sense. But I will say this, that some sellers have let some of these assets slip through. So if you ever see anything like that and you find that potential gem in there, I mean, you could even offer up to 100% of that and still make money on it. You see what I'm saying? Because let's go back to IPA. Okay. And in IPA, if we were to offer 100,000, I'm going to put 100,000 in our offer price, which is essentially 22% of the unpaid principal balance. Look at what our annual ROI is. Our yield is at 32.7%, and our equity is at 294,000. So it really puts us in a super strong position, and that's at par. That's asking. The seller said this is worth $100,000. We're going to give them $100,000, right? There's no discount there. Again, I think it's probably a typo. They'd probably come back and say, "Oh, well, we meant some whatever." But you never know unless you make that offer. So that's why I brought this up, because it really shows how you can manipulate these numbers very quickly to understand what your position is as you go into it. Now, you might say, you know what, I'm going to give the seller above par. I'm going to give them 120,000 for this asset, which is, pretty good. It's above par, but look at what our annual yield is. I would guarantee you, though, excuse me. Oops. Go back to the input sheet. I'm sorry. We're going down here. I would guarantee you, though, that this offer price at 55% is probably looking more like 80% instead of 55, just because if we take a look at this asset, and this, by the way, is probably the third step I would do as I look at these things to evaluate whether they're worth pursuing or not, is I would click on this Google Maps button down here, which actually opens up Google Maps and places the address in for you and takes you right to the subject property. Now, I don't know any other analyzer that can do this or puts you into give you an idea of what the property looks like that quickly, but this one does. Now, I'm going to verify this address, 2251. That's correct. It's the same address. So this is the house that we're looking at. I'm also going to take a look at this Google down here. It says this picture was captured in 2016, so it places it about 4 years old, a little over 4 years old. So the question that you ask yourself is, in 4 years, based on the condition that we're looking at, do you think this thing is going to be falling down? Because $100,000 is pretty much fall down condition, if that's truly what it was worth. I would say no, this is probably worth a lot more than that, especially given the comps in the area. So yes, this is something worth pursuing. And you might do a little dance with the seller and try to figure out what their sweet spot is. But 9 times out of 10, if you're going to offer more than what they're saying it's worth, you're pretty much golden. So in my opinion, I would put this on my yes list, and I would start doing more due diligence and start to dig into it. Now, what we don't know is we don't know if there's any back taxes owed on it. We don't know if there's any liens, mechanical liens, and so forth. So we'd have to do a little due diligence on that, which we've actually added some buttons in here for you to do some of that stuff. Like we've added this county button that you can click on, which in this case, the county website isn't available, but we can do more research on the county of Broward in Florida, and we can find what we need. Once we find that, we can enter any kind of back taxes out. Now, if there were any escrow fees or liens associated with it, like I said, junior liens, judgments, mechanic liens, child support even, you can add it here. One of the things I would do is run a search on this asset in one of those services out there, like I don't know, what's one of them? I think I have hold on one second. I'll give you guys a couple of resources here that we use. Let's see, here's one of them. This is Records Finder. I find this a pretty good resource in that if we want to find information out about borrowers, we can do that based on the address. If it's available, the system will find it and it'll tell us who the borrowers are. And then from there, we can go to another site called like pacer.org. I think it's pacer.org or pacer.gov, one of the two. And we can look to see if there has been any bankruptcies against that borrower. We can also look to see if there's any criminal activities, because if there are, that might raise some red flags as to whether or not this borrower is capable of moving forward. And then we go to the next phase of looking at the numbers, which is the foreclosure. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we're going to come back and we're going to leave this we're going to actually put this at 70%, which is where we had it. We're going to recalculate our offer price and leave it at 70%, which puts us at an 11.3% yield. But why we're doing that is because we want to look at this foreclosure and we want a realistic look at it. If we were to purchase this at 70%, which I think is reasonable, of the actual value, and I'm not saying the value that they're telling us, and we look at this foreclosure, we want to make sure that our minimum and maximum bids are in an area that's going to be acceptable if it goes to foreclosure. What I mean by that is that you, as a lien holder, when you go to foreclosure, have to give the auctioneer a minimum bid, and that minimum bid, you can set it whatever you want. So you have to ask yourself, how much do I want to make at foreclosure auction? What will satisfy me to, as I move forward? So what you can do is you can come down to your assumptions and you can set your minimum required return on investment for foreclosure at whatever you want. We have it at 15%. I could put this at 25%. And when I do that and I come back up here, you'll see that my return on investment for my minimum bid is at 25%. At 25, yes.
Yeah, quick question. Where does the extra $5,000 come from? The price is 120. Attorney fees are set to 5.5K.
Are we talking about the assumptions? What are we talking about?
I don't know, Jill was
Hey, Jill, you want to come on live and ask your question? Go ahead and raise your hand and I'll bring you on. There we go. Okay. Hey, Jill. Hi.
Yeah, I was just a little confused about the where you get those fees. Like up at the very top where it talks about, I guess where you just reperform it, it says you have 125,000 into it, but then you've got $5,500 in fees. So I was just kind of are in capital invested. So I was just sort of trying to figure out where that was coming from.
Are we talking about?
That was back when it was 120,000 was your offer price. But now it does the same thing now. It's 311,000 and it's 316,000 there.
Okay, I just put it back to 120 just so that we can follow what you're saying there. So that's a good question. The capital invested is 125,000. The reason it's 125,000 and not this 100 or 120,000 is because we have other expenses that we're incurring. So we have, in some cases, servicing costs. We may have holding costs. We could have insurances, taxes that we owe. There's all kinds of other expenses that go into this and this time frame. Now, from the time that we buy it to the time that we get it reperforming, that could be 3 months. Mm-hmm. So in that 3 months, we have a holding time that we're losing money. And so that all gets calculated into this capital invested. So what we're showing in each of these exit strategies is your true capital investment at each exit strategy. So you'll notice that in the foreclosure, the capital invested goes up. It goes up because now you have legal fees and you have more holding costs and more time. So that's what that's for. Does that make sense?
Jill?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jill. So going back to the foreclosure, we have, again, we were talking about minimum bid, and we set that minimum bid to 25%. Now, at 25%, my minimum bid has to be 173,000. The question is that we ask ourselves is, if the property is worth 739, is it feasible that this property would sell at foreclosure at 173,000? The answer is absolutely it would. I mean, you'd have to be pretty much a ding dong investor to not jump on that one. So yeah, so you could actually maybe take this up to 50 or maybe even 100% if it were at 120,000. But let's go ahead and put this back to where we were, 311,000. Now at 311,000, our minimum bid has to be 413. Again, the same question. If it's worth 739 or almost 740,000, will we be able to sell it at 413? The answer is yeah, probably all day long. So that's actually maybe even a low point. Now, if you wanted to take this property back, what you would do is you would look at your maximum bid and you would set your minimum to your maximum, and that's where it would be. That's as much as you can make at foreclosure auction right there, 456,000.
Why is that, Joe?
It's because you're only entitled to the unpaid principal balance plus your legal fees, your arrearages, any kind of advances and so forth, or anything that you've put onto the back end of the loan. that's what you're entitled to. You're not entitled to everything. Once you hit that maximum bid, anything that is above and beyond that goes back to the borrower. And that's what a lot of people don't really understand,
Right.
is that you're not entitled to that full equity, whatever it is. You know, you're only entitled to what you can make at that maximum bid. And in this case, you know, you're looking at a 38% return on investment or an annual yield of 19, almost 20%, which is pretty good at foreclosure. So, you know, if we were going to foreclosure today, and this was the scenario we bought it under, I would place my minimum bid at this maximum level right here, 456,000, because that is a perfect place to be, especially if it's worth 739. Even if it wasn't worth 739 and it was more like 650, that would still be a really good starting point, and you would still make that nut, right? Now, let's say nobody bought this thing at foreclosure auction. There were no bids, nobody bought it, nobody put an offer in. Then you take the property back, and at that point, and only at that point, are you entitled to that full equity, because now you are the owner of that property. Okay, does that make sense? So in foreclosure, if somebody bids on it, you're only entitled to that maximum bid. But if nobody bids on it, you take the property back, and now it's yours, and you can do with what you want. So if you were looking at it from a wholesale standpoint, you could sell that property outright and recoup your money. You could rent it. You can, you know, do seller financing on it. You can fix and flip it. And that's why we have all these other exit strategies in here. So let's say, for argument's sake, we did get a realtor on the phone. The realtor says, you know what, this thing's only worth 650,000. So we're going to put our as-is value at 650 in there. And we're going to take a look at that $650,000 value. If we took the property back at foreclosure, what does that look like for us? Well, we can see that our capital expenditure to this point, because of legal fees and holding costs and so forth, which is what Jill had brought up, is now $354,000. But even at that capital expenditure at this point, we're looking at a 27.4% yield, or an overall return on investment of 67%, which actually is really good. It's a good position to be in. So this, and again, these are conservative numbers, guys. This isn't like inflated. This isn't like pie in the sky. This is like real numbers that you can play with and manipulate and try to get to a sweet point where you can negotiate with the seller. Because I'll tell you that, you know, not all sellers are, you know, some sellers will give you a Zillow number, like this number here, 692. And let's just say it, maybe it was worth 692, but in most cases, this Zillow number is a lot higher than what the comps are coming back at. In our case, comps are coming back a lot lower. Now, I do see an outlier here that's 1.1 million. And in that case, you know, one of the things I would do is I'd literally delete that, which actually takes your values down and recalculates the average for you. But even in doing that, we're still looking at, if I were to recalculate this ARV, we're still looking at over 700,000. So it didn't make much of a difference. So we do have comps that are comparable to this property in the vicinity that have been sold and have a price per square foot. And so when we look at things like Zillow, there might be something else going on in the market. We'd have to you know, take a look at that. Let's take a look at these demographics here. The crime is average. It's not high, which is good. The income is high for the area. The school information wasn't available, which maybe means it could be in a more rural area. We can investigate that. Again, we can come back to Google and look at that. Population in the area is 27,500. The unemployment's at 8.5%. But again, we're in COVID right now, so that's kind of expected almost anywhere. If we go to Google and we take a look at just the general area we're in, you know, around our subject property, you know, we're basically on the coast here. we are in some prime property, and we're not in the hurricane zone, which is this area here, which is actually good. I mean, I guess all of it's a hurricane zone, really, because it all gets hit all the time. So,
Yeah, pretty much.
but the Gulf is really what gets hit the most, I would say. Anyway, you know, it doesn't look like it's rural. In fact, it's not. It's you know, in the meat of it, it's a few blocks away from the beach. It's in a good location. There's all kinds of shopping and retail around it. You know, so from that standpoint, not too worried about it. As far as the schools go, it looks like there's a school nearby here. You know, we can do some more research to find out what some of these schools are rated, and you know whether or not they're any good. But there's a high school right down the road here, so there are schools. And this is just Google. I mean, we can actually go straight to the schools area. There's a link that goes to HomeFacts, and in HomeFacts, see, HomeFacts is telling us the school rating is not determined. I'm not sure why that is, but if we go down to schools, they're saying there was no schools found in the
No
30
public school, that's why.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest bills.
So, but nevertheless, you can see how easy it is to find information out with the links that have been provided in the application for you, and how easy it is to dig up more information and to start really telling that story. Now, it's telling us that our market rents in the area are $4,500, which is actually really high. That could be a good thing for a lot of people looking to purchase a potential rental. So, you know, if we wholesale this thing out, we sold it for $650, we're looking at 27.4% yield for, you know, on our money. Basically, it's our return until we sell it. If we were to rent it, now here's where it gets interesting, because this rent actually looks pretty high compared to, you know, what's going out the door. So we're looking at a cash on cash of about 7%. We're looking at a yield of 18.7%. We're looking at a cap rate of 3.6, which is okay. Our recoup period is 13.5 years. And what's interesting here is our net cash flow. This is what we would earn on a monthly basis above our baseline is $2,155, which puts us in a position where we could refinance this, still get positive cash flow, and pull money out. And a lot of people do that. And that's a strategy that they use. And that's one of the reasons why we've added this finance tool up here for people. And we have a whole webinar on the finance tool and how that works. And, you know, if you guys are interested in that, let me know. I can dig that up and see if I can make it available. But from surface level, looking at this rental as a rental property, we're looking at a yield of 18.7%. And for a rental property, 18.7% is pretty darn good. You know, especially when you're given the fact that you have 25% operating expenses already calculated in. We can see right here, our operating for management, maintenance, and vacancy is 25%. So we've gone out, we've hired a maintenance or a management company for this rental property, and you know, we've put everything on autopilot, and we're now making $21.55. And what we've invested in it to this point is $350,314. Now, I will say this, that maybe there was a renovation that happened on this. If we come down here, we've also factored that in. If you have a rental rehab, meaning this isn't turnkey, you purchased, you took the property back and you have to do a little bit of work. Let's say that we put $10,000 for paint, tile, whatever. There wasn't a whole lot to do on it. And we come back up here to the rental, you'll see it went from 150 now to 160 capital invested. Our cash on cash went down just a little, didn't change it much. And our annual return or our yield is about the same. So it really didn't affect it too much. And what we're doing here is we're looking at this from the standpoint of renting it for 24 months and then selling it. Okay. You can rent it for as long as you want, but this scenario tells us that we're going to purchase the note, and it's going to take us 25.4 months to get this note to the point where we can rent it. Okay. Once we rent it, we're going to rent it for 24 months, and then we're going to sell it. Okay. And when we sell it, we're going to make 17.8% annually on that money that we've invested total, with an overall return on investment over a span of about 4 years of 100%, which puts you almost in that 20% range, a little bit below it, but that's not bad. Now, let's just say that some of the comps in the area, like we saw one that was 1.1 million. If you see a comp like that in the general area, you can always shoot for that high comp, and you can always try to renovate your property to get to that high comp. We've done it before and we've been successful. You got to make sure that you don't overbuild and spend too much money on it. You got to do it for the general area and what's going to sell. But in this case, let's just say, for instance, our ARV, or our after repair value, is the 714 mark. And, we're doing a medium renovation to 2,100 square feet. It's going to cost us $56,914. Now, with that expenditure, you'll come down here and you'll see under our capital invested, we have 411,500 invested. If I click on this button here, it brings the information up over here, and it tells us that if we were to, take the property back after foreclosure, renovate it, fix and flip it, we'll have 25.4 months invested in this thing as far as time goes. And our overall return on investment will be around 24.3%. So my thing is, fix and flips tend to be a little bit more risky. However, in certain areas they're not. If you can hit over 20% or in that 20 to 30% range, the additional money that you invest in the property might be worth it. It depends also whether or not it's in a hot market and you're going to be able to unload it. And, there's other factors obviously involved in fix and flips where you got to make sure that you're in a municipality that's not going to, totally come down on you for every little, aspect of it. Changing a light bulb, they're going to try to charge you for a permit or whatever. But anyway, you can find that stuff out fairly easy just by talking to contractors in the area, especially when you get to that point. You're going to have time to get to that point once you've purchased the asset. But what we're trying to do here on IPA is we're trying to get to a point where we look at all these exit strategies. We're in positive numbers all the way down, which means that it's going to be really difficult to lose on this unless something catastrophic happens. So we want to be in that positive. And basically at this point, we're saying, yes, this is an asset worth investing in at that 70% mark. Okay. Not at the 100,000 that they said it was worth, at that 70% mark. So from that standpoint alone, I would mark this as, okay, let's look into this further. Let's potentially make an indicative bid. Once you make your indicative bid, you spend a little money, you do a title report, you do an O&E report, you get some more information about the property, you look at the liens against it. And if there's anything significant there, then you come back to the seller and you adjust your bid accordingly. And that's typically how it works. So this tool right here not only tells you a story based on the numbers, but gives you kind of a playbook of how you can move through it. Now, when you get down to this wholesale level, you can do all kinds of things. Like I said, you can rent it, fix and flip it, but you can also look at creating your own paper, creating seller financing on it. A lot of people are doing that right now, and they're making a lot of money. So, like I said, there's many different ways you can look at it. You can even do partials on it once you do that seller financing. over here, one of the things we rarely talk about is our graph. Now, if you guys, study these graphs and you look at them, you'll realize that when you run that fetch all and all the information comes in and your assumptions are set correctly, all you really need to do is come over here to your graph and go, oh, let's take a look at my return on investment against these different exit strategies. Where does that put me? Same thing with profit. What does my profit look like? What does my capital invested look like? You're going to want to have lower capital invested. You're going to want to have a higher profit margin, obviously, and a high return on investment. So you're going to want to look for those areas that kind of, resonate with you. Now, with the capital invested, right now, it looks like the lowest would be in the reperform area, right? That would be our lowest, but it's really not that much different than our wholesale. It's really close to 350,000 versus 316. Okay. So, in this case, if I were to move through this property, take it back, I might just wholesale it outright or look into seller financing or something. The fix and flip wouldn't be too bad if I can hit that 1.1 million mark. If I talked to a realtor and they said, yeah, there's 3 or 4 houses going up at that 1.1 million because we're close to the water or whatever, and all you need to do is add another bedroom or this or that, and we decide to spend 150 instead of 56,000, we spend 150,000, and we get it up to that 1.1 million. Then we're starting to look at more value and more profit on that fix and flip. So that's when it becomes worth it. That's why we have it in there. And we've used that process before and we've been successful at it. So I know we're just about out of time. If there's any questions, let us know.
Looks like it's quiet out there. Yeah, I don't have anything. No questions. Good job, Joe.
All right. Oh, we got one question.
Do we have one? No.
April, did you have a question?
Who was that?
It's like April raised her hand.
April does. April. I just got that. So yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So if we're working on an asset and we want to save it, do we save it to the IPA or do we save it to our own computer? And also, can we keep personal notes on an asset?
Well, that's a great question. We have a file manager for everything that you do in IPA. So if you were to run multiple assets, we have an asset manager. I can go ahead, let me bring that up and show you what that looks like.
Sure how you'd save this. Let's just say that, and I believe that's what she's talking about as well. And I know she's talking about, but just if you want to save this.
Well, this isn't going to show her. This is actually the file manager that IPA has. So, so let's say that you were in. The reason I'm not saving this is because this is our development version, and it's not going to operate the same as what you guys have. Once you save this, what will happen is it'll automatically save into your file manager here. And when you're in your file manager, you can organize it by different folders, and in those folders you can have templates, you can have assets, you can rename them, you can do whatever. But this is where you're going to start and save to, and this is how you're going to keep organized. Now, to answer your other question, can we add notes? We actually have a contact section where we have notes that you can save in here. So let's say, for instance, you were interested in adding in excuse me, adding a note to a new company. I'm just going to put some gibberish in here. It says here, select the type of contact. We've actually put all kinds of contacts in here: attorneys, realtors, agents, architects. I mean, you name it, it's pretty much in here. And if it's not in here, let us know, we'll add it. but the idea is to select the type of contact it is, put their contact information in here, whatever it is, and you add the contact. And once that contact is added, you can actually add a note to that contact. And once you've added a note, you can just type in, this is a note. And then it brings in, that it's from the appraiser, who the contact was. And you could say it was a meeting, email, whatever, whether or not, you completed it or not. And then you update it. And then once it's updated, you actually have a list of all of your notes up here in search notes. So this is actually a really valuable tool to keep you organized on a per project basis, because IPA is nice that way in that we're looking at one particular asset here and we're able to keep all the notes for that one particular asset. Does that answer your question, April?
Yeah, that's really cool. I had one other question. If we were going to analyze the numbers on seller financing, would we do it in the rental section or the wholesale section, or does it have its own?
Well, for seller financing, that's kind of a whole different ball game, because seller financing involves creating paper and creating a new loan, essentially. Unless you're doing like you're reinstating the loan with the original borrower, and you're doing some kind of modification. That's a little bit different than actually creating the seller finance paper. Because you would create that once you've taken the property back. But yes, you could use a couple of things on the seller finance. You could look at the rental, you could look at the finance tool, and this finance tool, whether or not you're going to pull money out, or I don't know what the strategy is that you're using, but you create your paper. You can actually run whatever you've created through IPA if you want. Like, for instance, let's say that you're going to do some seller finance paper and you're going to do an interest rate of, let's say, 9%. Okay. And you have a value on the property. You can actually run that whole scenario through IPA. In fact, you can actually go right back to the input sheet and you can change this to 9%. You can change your terms to whatever it is you're going to do your seller financing for. Maybe it's 240. And let's say the unpaid principal balance maybe changes to something higher or lower. I don't know, whatever's you can change everything here. And then you can come back to the analyzer sheet and take a look at it from that standpoint to see what position that puts you in. And you can see here in this case, it really messed up our annual return on investment just by taking it to.
Joe, would you run it under note and occupied, or just REO? If you're maybe to get a better, scenario.
Well, no, because if you're going to do seller financing, you're creating a new note on it. So you're going to want it as a note. And it's probably in this case, what you're going to want to do is make it a performing note, right? Not a non-performing note. So if you're going to do seller finance paper, make it performing, put your information in, and then run it. And once you've run it, you'll see where that puts the value of that property, and you'll see some of the breakpoints, and you'll also see where maybe you want to sell that or do some partials on it, or whatever you're going to do with that seller finance paper. What's really interesting is once you put that information in and you look under the yield for the buyer, you can create a scenario where you say, I'm going to hold it for 3 years. And then after that 3 years, I want to know what position that puts me in to sell that lien to another buyer at a specific yield. And I want to know what's owed or what the unpaid principal is at that point as well. That's what this will give you, which is really nice. But that's not really what this was designed for, seller financing, but you can get those answers using the tool.
Okay, cool. Thank you. This is really super cool. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Appreciate it.
Well, Joe, it looks like it's about that time.
All right. Okay, well, we're going to call it a wrap.